Today I've built these sci-fi buildings for packaging inserts. This brutalist look works great for Imperial outposts or barracks, and they are super easy to make. To break up all of this bland grey, I've also added in a bunch of Star Wars propaganda posters that I took from online. These doors and windows all use templates that you can find in the description below. So starting out, I had 4 almost identical packaging inserts. There are 2 that are the same and then 2 more that are the same. I was originally going to try and make them stackable to easily store, but the addition of the doors and the extruding pieces really make it look a lot better. We're just going to start by cleaning up the packaging insert so we can work with it a lot easier. I made this template based on a 3D model I found online. I print out 3 copies per door and stick them to this craft foam. With that, we can get an interesting layered look by slowly removing more and more from each additional door that we stick on top. To maintain that sci-fi brutalist look, it's important to have a sharp knife and cut very straight lines. So the first bottom piece will just be the door by itself, and then here is the second piece where we're slowly going to remove pieces from the top. So this is the gap in between the 2 parts of the door. And then cut out these little indents to make it look more sci-fi and interesting, rather than a flat piece of metal. Because I was originally using quite a dull blade, I go around on the back side and just finish those cuts on the other side. I used glue stick to hold all of these pieces together, and the glue stick isn't that strong, so I can easily peel off the paper, and if I ever made a mistake, I could just peel it all away without wrecking anything. And then the last piece is just this trim around the edge of the door frame, and also the little handle at the front. I also cut these little triangle pieces down the bottom. I'm not quite sure what they're meant to be, like a little skirting or something, but it just adds a little bit more interest to the entire door. And just making sure it fits and it doesn't look too out of place on this little packaging insert. I'll use PVA glue to stick that on and get a better bond than glue stick would allow. From a sort of logical point, those slopes along the edge of the building would be much too easy to climb up or slide down, so I wanted to add these little railings that could be little metal fences or even electric. And these pieces are from a really old and broken plastic folder. Using super glue on these is pretty tough because the packaging insert soaks up all of the glue, so I eventually come through and use bicarb soda to get a much stronger bond. I use that same plastic folder and I use the hard covering as some metal strips that I can place around onto different parts. I liked how the doors came out, so I also made these little windows as well. And I'm using the same method, except instead of stacking 3, I'm only stacking 2 on top of each other, making sure to get some really nice and sharp cuts. And these can be used as windows, vents, and can be placed in all different sorts of orientations all around the piece. I want to add some sort of designation to each of these buildings. So I just take a piece of paper and line a stripe down the edge of the side. And then I'll come through later on and paint that in a bright purple and yellow. I use a few strips of cardstock, cut a little bit thicker than the thickness of the door, and stick those to the side just to add some more thickness and some more sharp, jagged lines. I give all the pieces 2 coats of black paint and PVA glue. I wanted to test how well that PVA glue would hold up compared to Mod Podge, because if you're doing a much bigger insert, PVA glue will be much cheaper to get. And they hold up pretty well. As you can see, I originally painted it all silver, but I didn't really like how that looked. So I just came through and painted all of the building, all of the stone in a grey, and left all the windows and doors and little greebly bits as a silver. And then to give it a grungy, more realistic look, I give the whole stone a black wash. And to return some highlights and to distinguish different pillars that are in this structure, I dry brush with that same grey. I originally thought I was done, but this grey looks too bland. So to give it some more interesting colour, I printed scale propaganda posters from online and dipped them in a brown wash and stuck them all over the buildings. To make them look interesting, I ripped up some, tore off some, folded some down, and layered them all over the top of each other. That way they look really old, like they've been here for a really long time. On the buildings that had those stripes along the side, I used some really bright colours to paint those and make them stand out from the rest. For the doors, instead of just a normal acrylic black wash, I use an oil wash, and that works a bit better in my opinion with the metallic paint. But what are the Imperials if not something to rebel against? I printed off this scale of Sabine's markings and cut it out and to use as a template to add graffiti to the walls. A sharp blade is really important here, as you will not get clean cuts without one. I stuck my stencil on using masking tape and came through with really bright orange to fill the center. This is quite fiddly, but it's very fun as well because you can be quite messy with it. Because it's a spray can, it will have overspray and there'll be paint going everywhere. With the main shape blocked in, I take it off and stipple around the edges to mimic that overspray like a misty brush. And then add some thin lines as if to mimic that running paint effect. And with that, we've turned our rubbish packaging inserts into usable terrain. It's functional, but more importantly, it tells a story and helps you immerse yourself into the world. If you want to see more stuff like this, I have plenty planned, so like and subscribe.